Hello, it's Dr. Joanna Nadin here in the last of this set of videos, and this time I'm going to talk about endings. And I will start with a William Goldman quote. "The key to all story endings is to give the audience what it wants, but not in the way it expects." And that's paraphrasing Aristotle. An ending is the inevitable though unexpected consequence of all that has preceded it. So the ending, for me, starts with your beginning. It starts with what Mary Cole calls the promise of the novel. That's the contract between you and your reader that says this is going to be a story about the what if, basically, the premise. If you're clever, it will literally come back to the very beginning of the novel. Remember the beginning of Cosmic by Frank Cottrell Boyce? Mum, Dad, if you're listening, turn to the very end of the book. In my memory, these words are written massively because they are spelled out on the moon, but it ends with just two words. Hello, Dad. He knows his dad is listening now. This doesn't mean the ending should be predictable, it coming back to the beginning again. It just means it's the only way that it can end. It means building up in such a way that the reader unconsciously knows where you're heading with all of this. Think about the way most stories are very familiar. Girl falls in love with new boy only to realise the one has been right under her nose all along. But that kind of ending can still be very satisfying and surprising because you will have made us invest in those characters and care about them along the way. Truffaut demanded two things for endings: spectacle and truth. And I think that's a very good way of looking at it. The ending of your novel, of course, the final act, Act 3 or Act 5 if you're working in 5 acts, you have the climax and the resolution. The climax is your spectacle. The resolution is your truth. Both of those, though, come down to one thing, and that is change, something I've been talking to you a lot about. Let's start with the climax within that. Remember all the other things that we've learned in these videos. Story isn't just plot, it's not just a string of events getting characters from A to B, it's what they learn about themselves along the way, it's the effect those events have on them, it's the change, and nowhere is that more profound or prevalent than at the very end of the novel. If the beginning is where unexpected change first kicks our story off with the inciting incident, and Act 2 is basically change along the way, all those different conflicts, it follows that the ending, unless it's a trilogy or ending on a cliffhanger, we'll talk about that in a minute, the ending is where change stops, but not before a battle. All the conflict, all that change along the way has been building to this powerful climax when the character will be asked for the last time, and the most important time, what kind of a person are you? Or they will ask of themselves, who am I? The answer to that should be, really, I'm going to be a better person. That's the pot of gold your protagonist has really been chasing, whatever their actual goal or grail appeared to be to them. But to get to that pot of gold, that realisation, whether it's an actual or metaphorical pot of gold, they will have to metaphorically or possibly really fight a dragon, because a prize that big is really worth fighting for. Mary Cole, in this very useful book, Writing Irresistible Kidlit, gives an excellent list of what the climax should do. Number 1, it should present your character with their biggest challenge. We've just talked about that. Number 2, it should incorporate their core strength and test their core weakness. Number 3, it should showcase the moral dilemma. Number 4, it should include the emotional turning point, that realisation. Number 5, it should have a badass action sequence. I'm not so fond of badass action sequences, they're not my thing, but the big scene, basically, the big emotional scene if it's not an action sequence. Above all, basically, it needs to count, so do not go easy on your protagonist. If anything, be tougher. You need to ask yourself 2 questions. What happens if your character succeeds? And what happens if your character fails? If the answer to either of those is everything goes back to normal, then that is not the ending. And this is where resolution comes in. If they succeed, the protagonist's view of the world should be updated and improved. The normal life they go back to will be altered. In other words, it will be the new normal. That's what we tend to call it, the ending part. And the clue is in that name. New normal implies some kind of change and resolution. It can be brief and done as an epilogue, but it does need to be there. It doesn't need to be neat and complete, because life isn't neat and complete. It doesn't necessarily mean a happy ever after and it all worked out in the end. It certainly doesn't mean the character will have got what they wanted when they began their quest. And it does not mean, as I have said, a return to the status quo that opened the novel. What it should mean is that life will never be the same again, and your main character will never be the same again. The climax will have brought about absolute and irreversible change. But something has been worked out. That character has grown, has new knowledge, and has come to terms with that. In other words, the character has got what they needed. And so should have the audience, to your readers. So the ending needs to do three things in that, the resolution. It needs to show the spread of the climactic effects, show what they mean to the character and the world. If your story is political and not just personal, that is. It should show the new beginning or the possibility of a new beginning. It's also often where the subplots will climax and loose end will be tied up. If ends remain untied, that will be because they're forming the basis of book 2, I'm assuming. So be clear about that. Use it to your advantage by setting the seed for the sequel. But I want to be clear on this as well. Even the first part of a series or a trilogy needs a satisfying ending. Yes, there will be hints of more to come. Not everything will be resolved. It shouldn't all be resolved. And not everything is resolved in standalone novels either, necessarily. Even the most satisfying ending should leave us wanting more. Also, actually, if this is a standalone novel, you can still give us hints of the future. Epilogues and postscripts can do that for you. An epilogue means speech added on. In Greek drama, one of the actors would step forward and comment on the events, it would contextualise their significance for the audience. A postscript, in contrast, is a brief summary of future events. We often see them at the end of films, especially biopics. They let us know what happened next. If done badly, this is a note of caution, if done badly, they can appear lazy or clunky, shortcuts to a proper ending. I am horribly guilty of rushing my endings in my draft that goes out to editors and having a nice neat epilogue, and then I'm told to expand the ending. Sometimes, in fact, the one I'm about to edit by up to 10,000 words because I rushed. Because when you get to the point when you're writing the ending, you just want to get to the end, and I'm a terror for doing that. But if done well, those epilogues, I have used them elsewhere where they have, I believe, and my editors believe they were done properly that time. They can be illuminating and hugely satisfying. Some novels do have open endings, but to repeat, that doesn't mean no ending. It can mean a question unanswered or an emotion unfulfilled. It can mean a character standing at the crossroads with several ways to turn. But the audience should be sufficiently primed to be able to fill in what they're going to do, to decide for themselves what will happen. If they're unable to decide, they'll be unsatisfied, and you do not want an unsatisfied reader. Just to bring that back to the idea, we talked about the controlling idea when we talked about resolution before. So the ending is where the controlling idea, that why for your novel, is at its sharpest and most poignant, because this is the point at which your character will have realised the point that you wanted to make to the world, basically. Your readers will realise it. Love conquers all, perhaps. Friendship's more important than love. truth hurts but lies hurt more, crime doesn't pay, whatever it is that you really wanted to explore in your novel and say to the world, this is how I feel about the world. Whatever it is, now is the time to really make it sing. This is the point you want your reader to make that connection and have that eureka moment. It's the takeaway message, as I've said before, that you want to linger in your reader's head long after they turn the final page. Remember, I mentioned cosmic. One of the themes was what makes a good dad. And the answer for Liam was one who listens. We know at the end Dad is listening. We also know that Liam has realised that being a dad is hard, that he appreciates him more. So that hello Dad at the end rings with meaning, a proper happy ending, and one that makes me cry every time. I'm amazed I've not welled up at this point, probably because I'm worrying about tech. I'm always worrying about tech. But when I read it in class, I cannot do so without welling up because it's such a beautiful, perfect ending. It's just so neat with those two words. And these happy endings like this one are the most satisfying because they play into that basic human need for control. They reassure us that despite all the devastation around us, all the sadness and struggle, there is control. As Roy Baumeister says, life is change that yearns for control. Story allows us to feel that we've lost control, to experience this chaos at one remove, to indulge in bad behaviour or risk or the roller coaster ride without actually placing us in danger. And of course, at the end of a roller coaster ride, you come to a satisfying halt, though you may be giddy afterwards for a few minutes. That's what the happy end of a story is. The chaos of the world has been conquered, the lost thing has been found, the crime has been solved, the protagonist is no longer lacking. That's effectively what story is overall. I think it's imposing control on seemingly random events to say something important. It's how we actually create ourselves as humans as well. We write a narrative for ourselves, connecting vague memories into something that resembles a proper cause and effect narrative that we actually rewrite to suit ourselves along the way. I want to talk for a second about non-happy endings. Certainly in children's books, we're encouraged to go for the happy ever after. But are they always satisfying or true or even useful? The fact is that books, especially children's books, I believe, can and do change the world by transporting us, by showing us a protagonist being affected and affecting change. They open us up to the possibility of change. And we're at our most vulnerable to new thought processes when we are being transported. Think of, disturbingly, Trump rallies, or further back you may have seen videos of Hitler rallies. If our emotions are roused, if we're transported in that way, we're very vulnerable to new thought. When Kevin Brooks's Bunker Diaries won the Carnegie Medal, it was controversial because that book is relentlessly bleak. There is no yay pot of gold at the end of that. Louise O'Neill's Asking for It and Only Ever Yours, which is a sort of YA Handmaid's Tale, are similar in that. I'm going to read you the ending of Louise O'Neill's Only Ever Yours now. I hold out my arm, offering myself to him. The needle sinks into my skin, the liquid whispering, forget, forget, to my blood. I can feel it burning through me, licking at my veins with thousands of tongues. I'm ready now too. I'm ready to feel nothing forever. The YA writer Alan Gibbons always says in his talks, you can lead a child into the darkest of rooms, but you have to give them that glimmer of light, of hope that shows them the way out. I concur with that. The ending to Joel Alone is not necessarily happy ever after. He's not returned to his mum, he's put into care, but there is hope. He's seeing her sometimes. He's slowly rebuilding something with her. It was important to me to be realistic. it was also important that the book prompted action, or at least discussion, about poverty and neglect. And I wonder in that sense whether Only Ever Yours actually may achieve more by avoiding that catharsis of the happy ending. Catharsis lets out our emotional energy, it gets rid of it, dissipates it. After finishing Only Ever Yours, I had no relief. I was angry. I wanted to change things. I wanted to shout, to rail, to march, to shout "Me Too." Obviously, it's an incredibly feminist novel. And I'd be interested, I'm using this novel on one of my teaching modules, and I'm interested to see what other people's reactions are to that, because some people I know, other friends of mine, find it relentlessly bleak. For me, it was invigorating in a strange way. And I wonder if any of you writing are thinking of going for an ending like that. Whatever ending you go for, though, I'm going to wish you good luck with your work in progress. There is no exercise for you in this video. I just hope you're reaching a point now where these little talks are really helping you craft your work and make it sing and create something that really lingers in the mind of your readers. Thank you for listening. Bye.